Hi, everyone. Welcome to the first in a series of videos Fahrenheit Advisors will be making to wrap up and close out the year. As many of you know, I'm Laura Bowser, and I lead the human capital consulting practice here at Fahrenheit. And today with me is Merryman Putnam, who leads our compensation division. As we approach the end of 2023 and look ahead into 2024, I think it's essential that we take stock of all the evolving trends and what we're seeing happening right now in HR, especially when it comes to compensation, which has been huge the last year given inflation and given a lot of the legislation that's come into play. So, Merriman, 2023 saw a huge increase in the demand for compensation work across the industry. Our team felt that demand, and I know going into 2024, I don't see that slowing down. So, what do you see as being the primary drivers for this increase? And do you see it taking off even more going into the future?
Yes, as you said, 2023 has been insane. It has been super, super busy and a lot of, different factors driving it. I would say we still are dealing with residual challenges from the pandemic, the remote work situation with companies really trying to figure out the balance between being back in the office and working remotely. And even if you're working remotely, but you want to wander around the country while you're working remotely. So a lot of looking at how do we structure our pay based on geographic differentials. And, everybody's just wanting to know what is the best way to work through the different geographical areas that people are living in and coming back to the office. So that's driving it. High inflation of 2022. And it was the employees market, and they really were driving everything. Companies were begging people to come to work, having to pay very high salaries to new and inexperienced employees. So they got them in the door. But then that 20-year tenured employee is like, well, wait a minute. And so, pay transparency is out there. So trying to really now right size, how do you figure out how to handle internal equity issues? The great resignation was obviously that pressure with the companies, pay equity going on, that whole issue of trying to pay people to get them through the door that has caused a lot of pay equity issues. So it's not just demographic pay equity issues, if you will. That's not even a large part of what I'm seeing driving these issues. And it's really the bringing the lower, less experienced people in there at higher rates than the long tenured, strong employees. So that's really a driver. And then pay transparency, all of the state by state, as they're starting to require pay transparency and having ranges. When you post a job, having them posted with the job, that is really driving companies. And a lot of them don't have salary ranges for their jobs or a graded salary structure. So getting those tools in place has become really a hot button in 2023 and probably moving forward as well.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting the conversation around pay transparency, right? Because a lot of folks are looking for where do I go to find this data? How do I make sure and ensure that I'm within the right ranges to be competitive? And so one of the questions that you and I have been fielding is around AI and salary management. It's a hot topic right now. Everyone's talking about AI. But what are you seeing in the industry when it comes to AI? Are there any best practices right now that we can discuss with our clients and that they need to be aware of because it's so new?
Well, it's the precursor, I would say, to AI is Google searches. So for so long, we've been saying don't use internet searches. I mean, I would say from a compensation professional standpoint, data integrity is the number one most important part of my job, making sure that the data I'm pulling and providing to clients is really strong, it's backed up, it has integrity. So, internet searches, you don't know where that data is sourced. Who knows who's posted it online? It's really not a good resource for companies, even though it's tempting to do the Google search. But if you do, you're going to find administrative assistant. What does an administrative assistant pay? Well, you might find a range from 40,000 to 120,000. So you don't know where that data is coming from. You don't know the size of the company. You don't know the industry. You don't know the location. You don't know the revenues. You have no backup information. You don't know how long the employees have been working or what their experience is. There are so many unknowns with that type of data. So that said about Google searches, it kind of translates into AI as well. And I have been playing around with different AI tools and doing searches just to see what it would come up with. And I would say, one, you don't know where the data is coming from. It's open
Right.
source. So it's really essentially coming off of the internet. Whereas the salary surveys that we use, that's all, data has been submitted by HR departments. Experts are going through it, making sure it's accurate. making sure it's representative. And these are for subscription only tools. So it's not stuff that you can just go and randomly get. So the AI, I'm not saying it won't get there, but it's definitely not there. And what's really interesting is at the bottom of almost every single search I tried, it says, please note that these are just predictions and may not be accurate. It's always best to consult with a professional in the field for the most up-to-date information. And I'm reading that literally word for word because it sounds self-serving, but that is literally what comes up on all the searches because
Yeah.
they know that the data has not been scrubbed by experts at this point. But then, I do broader searches, which is interesting because what are the compensation trends in 2024? And that is actually a little bit better because the results that came through, they did quote known sources like SHRM and World at
Mm.
Work and Wall Street Journal and Forbes. So you actually knew where the trend data was coming from. So it made you feel confident in that. But what is interesting is I asked specifically about compensation, and almost everything that came back was about benefit. And so it's not
Interesting.
distinguishing between the two, which in my world, there is a big difference between a benefit and salary. Employees are finding that benefits are more important than salary, and another search showed that they're less important than salary. So that's kind of interesting. Like
Mhm.
anything, they're different sources, they're different perspectives. It's interesting to see. I'm sure AI is going to go far beyond what I can even envision at this point, but it is definitely not there from a data integrity standpoint. And it doesn't give you that third party unbiased opinion either, because like with anything, you can manipulate data and we're all
Right.
human. So if you are looking for market data for a specific job for a specific person in your organization, and you know that person's a really strong performer or a really poor performer, you might tend to round up or round down
Mhm.
depending.
100%. And I know that you and I have even started putting some disclaimer language in our proposals just to be safe so that people understand we're using real sources. And this is data integrity is key to us and to our team. And again, not that it won't get there, but it is a little bit scary. AI has the ability to sort of make up based on the trends that it's pulling from. So you have no idea where it's pulling from. And a couple of years from now, maybe it'll get there. So, Merriman, one of the questions since you were playing with the AI, what are the biggest trends and hot topics that you see coming up? I know comp continues to be hot, but anything that we should be aware of next year and clients should be looking at?
I think in some respects it's going to be more of the same, but I think everybody's going to be unsettled. It's a presidential
Mhm.
election year. That's always unsettling a little bit because you don't know what the hot buttons are going to be for the next administration. And the government is driving a lot of what we're seeing as far as the pay
Right.
transparency. And so I don't see that going away. And I think more and more organizations are going to need to really beef up their compensation programs. They're going to need to really make sure they have neutral data that they're using. They're going to have to post the salary surveys, finding the right balance, I think, for the compensation programs. How much do we need to pay in salary versus benefits versus perks? Pre pandemic, a lot of companies were focused on perks that were crazy perks, but in office. And that was really driving a lot of what the spending was on compensation packages. But now that's a moot point, or at least for a couple of years, it was definitely a moot point. And even though companies are trying to do some things to attract people, more and more people are like, okay, well, wait a minute, maybe I just want higher salary and let me figure out how I want to spend my money.
Right.
On the other hand, there are companies that are trying to beef up their perks again to drive people back into the office. So it'll figuring out the balance of that and the whole compensation package, I think, is important. Pay transparency is going to be big, and learning how to communicate. It starts with establishing a compensation philosophy and what is the organization's compensation philosophy going to be? How are we going to pay versus market? And so it's establishing it, and then it's also abiding by it, and it's communicating it. A lot of times employees don't really understand what is behind the numbers. So, okay, they say this is what we pay for a job, but how do you know that? So educating managers and then letting them educate the employees about how you come up with this. It's nice to be able to say, okay, we hired a third party. They have data sources that they use. This is what the market pays for this range. This is how we target. If you're early in your career, you're going to be in the lower end. If you're longer in your career, you're going to be in the higher end. Just communication is going to be key as well. And pay equity, still right sizing from crazy past 3 years that we've had, I think going to be important.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think people are always aware how much politics and socioeconomic factors really influence the compensation conversation. And then you throw in 50 different states with different laws that are constantly
Mhm.
changing. And part of what our team does is make sure that our clients are aware of all these regulations so that they're making the best informed decisions when it comes to compensation benefits and retaining their talent. So, if anyone has questions or wants to learn more, or if you need help with your compensation planning or analysis, reach out and Merryman and I can take care of you. Thanks.
Absolutely. Thank you.